Welcome to the TechCast hosted by Secure Dynamics. With me, I have a past ex-colleague, Laurie Conmesser, who's currently the head of worldwide partner and alliance sales at Infoblox. Welcome, Laurie.
Thank you. Great to see you.
Great to see you. I know it's been a long time, and great we can actually connect on the TechCast. So I'll be honest with you, right? One of the things I do before engaging with guests is to do a social profile and go and see what he or she has talked about. And I'll tell you, for you, it took me 3 minutes, 4 minutes, and I said, boom, the first article that I hit was like, okay, this is it. I've got enough over here. And it really, I mean, the article covered a lot of things, but the first thing I want to really talk about, which I don't think is given as much importance as it should, is how does somebody navigate the tech workplace? And there were three things that you had pointed out over here, which if somebody had told me this when I first joined my first company, it's like, wow, this would have like saved me a lot of many years of hardships, if I can say that. The first one is saying no. The second is allowing yourself that personal time. And the third piece is asking for help. I'm pretty sure we're going to cover the entire 10, 12 budgeted time just on this, but I'm going to pause there. What made you talk about this so openly? And number one, number two is give some ideas to people. How do they actually implement the saying no, asking for help, and finding personal time?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And, listen, we always talk about the things that we sort of struggled with and that we found success with. And this was one of the things that I sort of struggled with. Somebody early in my career also said, learn to say no, but that's not always easy when you're first trying to make a name for yourself.
Exactly.
So what I learned to say early in my career, instead of saying no, because I wanted to be a pleaser, I wanted to show up well, I learned to say yes, but.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, but. And what that means is, okay, yes, that's a great idea. But if I go and focus on this, this means that I now have to give up these other three priorities. So can you help me help tell me which one of these three that I should reprioritize? And it kind of puts it back on that person to say, oh, wow, well, I didn't realize that I was having to reprioritize that. Maybe we should wait until next quarter to maybe think about this great idea I just had. Or, this is so important. You're absolutely right, Laurie. Let's re-talk about how we reprioritize those things, and you make people part of the process. So that's kind of an easier way to kind of step into that, right? And it feels better. I'm still adding value. I'm not necessarily saying, no. I'm saying yes, but I'm saying that there's some trade-offs that sort of come with that, right? And help be part of that process to help me prioritize that. The other thing you mentioned was sort of personal time. And I think as I've gotten busier in my career, and I will say, I'm not going to say older, I'll say more mature. But as I've gotten more mature, I realize how important personal time is. Yeah. And that means, listen, before the day starts, I get up very early. I'll get up at 5:30 before anybody else, so I can have a few minutes with myself, just kind of setting the intention of the day. It doesn't always go that way, by the way, right? But I want to set a good intention. Here are the things that I want to make sure that I cover today. Here's how I want to show up on this meeting, and I've prepared very well for this. Those kinds of things I think are always important. And I really value the time to just take breaks, especially now being from the work from home and just being glued to your computer all day. Right. Sometimes I'll get a quick 30 minutes in and I'll just walk outside for a few minutes and just so I can see the air, or I'll start to take a call sometimes outside where I don't need to present, right? And I'll say, are you okay if I'm walking while we're talking? Right. And, people are a little bit more adaptable to it, but it's important to create those spaces where you have that personal time so you can think and recharge and reflect. I think that's really important. And then the third one you mentioned was...
So Laurie, before we move on, I think I wanted to double click on this one, particularly because what you mentioned about taking time for yourself, but you're a leader as well, right? So how do you empower your team members right?
Mm-hmm.
Who may be looking at this and saying, hey, I have more time because I'm commuting less and less, and therefore I can start early and start like, unlike you, they could just kind of dive both feet in and not kind of take a break for 6 hours. So as a leader, how do you help your teams through taking that time for themselves, especially if they haven't done that in the past?
Yeah, so I am very fortunate that I have built probably the best team of my career, and a lot of the leaders that I have worked for me and known me for a very long period of time, and the ones that haven't are quickly getting to learn my style. And that is, I check in with them every day. There's not a day that goes by that we're not checking in, and we'll talk about, great, what's on the calendar for today? What do you have going on? What so that I can help kind of prioritize those things. But I can also give permission to say, I'll cover this meeting. Why don't you take a break? I know you've got to take your son to karate. Go do that and be mindful in that process. Or I know that this is a late call for you because you're on the East Coast, or you're in Europe, or you're in Australia. Let me cover this call for you. You continue sleeping, and I'll give you the notes when you wake up. And they'll do the same for me, right? Since I'm waking up early, let me take that call tomorrow, and that way you can kind of have some time with the family. So it is kind of reviewing those priorities and also giving permission to take that time, and just being very honest about those things. I think that's the first thing. It's just being very honest about it and very transparent about what's on the workload and what's really important and what is moderately interesting, right?
No, great tips. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and then the last piece, which probably the hardest for me, is going and asking for help.
Yeah. This is another one that we often, starting out in your career, I would say, and even navigating my career, is often sort of looked at as kind of an ego buster if you ask
Correct.
people for help.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's actually a sign of strength. Because, listen, people don't get to where they are by themselves. I mean, you can always look back on very, very successful people, and they'll talk about the people that surrounded them and kept them going, and, in their home life and in their work life and in their communities. And so it's okay to say, listen, and this is another very frank conversation that I have with my team members as well, that sometimes we get a little overloaded, and we'll say, listen, I'm getting at capacity. I'm getting a little bit overloaded, and I'll say, great, okay, let's jump in and figure out who else can jump in to help you, or let's kind of reprioritize those things. But I've often reached out to people throughout my career to ask for help, and part of that help is, listen, here's where I want to be in my career, and here's where I am, and can you help me identify the gaps? What am I, where am I, and where do I need to be, and how would you kind of view that? And people will help you in that, and kind of stepping into that. So it's not a sign of weakness at all. It is a sign of strength.
Wow, like I said, I don't, and there's so much over here that I have other things written down, but that's for another episode. Again, thanks for your time. I think the thing that I took away, and hopefully the viewers too, is, I mean, these are actionable things. This is not an MBA class where you go over there and you talk about all these theories. This is stuff you can actually put into place right now, right? At least for me, I think this is extremely valuable. So again, thanks for your time, Laurie, and looking forward to future conversations.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.